The updated Quebec flood map now affects hundreds of municipalities. 17 were just removed, primarily in the greater Montreal area. If your home is in a flood zone and has recently been flooded and you want to sell or buy, well, what does that have to do and how will that affect the price of the home? What do you need to know? Nick Markou is here to try to explain some of this whole complicated situation to us. Nick, it was so hard to watch and see in the spring what people were going through with the flooding. And I'm sure you're in a unique situation as a real estate broker watching this go on and thinking about the values of these homes.
Yeah, it's first of all extremely sad to see, and it's very hard to deal with this kind of situation. It's important to note that recently there's been a lot of updates in the flood maps. There was about 813 municipalities that were in flood zones in Quebec, and they've recently revised that, and I think they've removed about 20 or 30 of them, and I think they're down to about 783. And like you said before, they've removed about 17 in the greater Montreal area.
Now, maybe this is an obvious question, but let's just explain it anyway. There were municipalities really wanting badly to get off of those maps. What would be the reason for that?
I think basically it's to keep their property value. I think being in a flood zone, is a little bit risky for buyers. Maybe they don't want to go into that kind of thing, even though some of the flood zones were like, for example, 0 to 100 years, which have never been flooded. They were arguing to get removed for that reason.
So if we pick up on that point, the 0 to 100 years, 0 to 20 years, can you explain what that means for homeowners or prospective home buyers?
Basically, the 0 to 100 years is you have a percentage of getting flooded now within 100 years, basically. So the 0 to 100 years is a 1% chance of getting flooded. The way they calculate those things are usually by height, elevation of water, wave effects, and that kind of thing. So 0 to 100 would be probably one of the zones that are not so problematic.
0 to 20, a much higher likelihood of it happening.
Exactly. 0 to 20 years is what they call like a special intervention zone. It's the one where all those people had those issues with their floods getting, their homes getting flooded, etc. So.
Now, if it happened to you this spring, a lot of people are still waiting. They're waiting on insurance. They're waiting on the government. What advice do you have for those people right now?
What they've done basically is they're saying that whoever has had damage 50% and over, I believe they're not giving permits for the people to renovate their homes. And they've actually stopped even giving permits in 0 to 20 ranges for new construction. So basically, they're allowing the people who have had 50% or less damage to their property renovate their homes. And for the moment, I think the ones with more than 50%, I don't really know what's going to go on at the moment, but it's a little bit tough for everyone.
And if you're a buyer hunting in one of those areas, you're really going to want to know the history of the house that you're looking at buying.
If there is a buyer hunting in those areas, which I think a lot of the people judging the circumstances are not really looking into buying those kind of things. But if there is, and let's say they go into one of those homes that was renovated that had less than 50% damage, I think it's very important to be diligent on what kind of renovations were done. What are the the probabilities of it reoccurring.
Right.
So a lot of things to look at. And a lot of this flood information is going to be in your certificate of localization.
Right.
So especially for the people who have been removed or had updated revisions in their areas based on the flood maps, they should look at their certificate of localizations and maybe get them updated if they're thinking of selling.
Great advice as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nick Markou, broker with RE/MAX. Lots of great advice.